my channel. If you're new here, my name is Megan and this is Itty Bitty Speech, and we talk all about engaging and inspiring ideas for itty bitty communicators, as well as some fun lifestyle things that I'm going to throw in here or there. So it would mean so much to me if you would click the subscribe button below and subscribe to my channel. My husband and I, he's my editor, are really trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the summer so we can keep putting out this content for you once school starts. So please, it doesn't cost you anything. I won't spam you with emails or anything. Just click that subscribe button down below and you will get told when we post new videos. Now today, we are going to talk all about how I structure literacy-based or storybook-based therapy sessions. There is a lot of research, evidence-based research that goes into this kind of structure that I use, and I will link those articles down below if you're interested in the research, as well as my own 5 years of clinical experience and some information that has come from other SLPs and teachers and things like that. So I'm going to tell you the 6-step kind of system that I use to structure a literacy-based session to keep itty bitties engaged. And for me, that's K4, K5, and young squirrely first graders that really don't love to pay attention to a story. Also, I work in an urban school with a very low socioeconomic population. So just as a generalization, they don't have as much experience reading stories. So I'm not quite sure how those of you who work in suburban districts or rural districts, how this goes, but just as a generalization, a lot of my students come in with little to no experience reading storybooks at home. Some of them do, some of them have a lot, but I'm also kind of teaching them how to engage in a story. And for kids with language disorders, there's an extra layer of difficulty on that because sometimes they just don't understand what they're reading, so it's just not interesting to them. So I want to scaffold their knowledge so that they know kind of what to expect, they can understand the story a little better, and that's my job as their SLP. So I'm going to show you the 6 steps that I use. Now, most of my students that use this kind of framework come to me twice a week for 30 minutes. Some of them come more, and it really depends on the student. You know your students best, so everything I'm going to say in this video is just my clinical experience. Don't take it as law, just maybe take some of the ideas that might work for your students and adapt them, because your students, or if you're a mom that's watching this, your children, you know them better than I do. I don't know them at all. So just take these as some ideas and know that this is what I do with my students, usually twice a week for 30 minutes, usually in groups of 2 or 3. So that's what I'm going to do. So without further ado, let's get into step 1. Okay, so the first thing that I always do before we start a book unit, start a new storybook, is I pre-teach vocabulary and or activate prior knowledge. So you can do this lots of different ways. I'm going to show you the way I usually do it. It's something I create specifically for this purpose, but then I'll tell you some other ways you can do it as well. You don't have to go out and buy all sorts of new resources and materials. You can use what you have. So I'm going to use, for this example, the book The Paper Bag Princess. If you haven't read this, I absolutely love it. It's the story of a princess whose prince gets taken by a dragon. She goes to save the prince from the dragon, the princess does, and then at the end, the dragon blows her clothes off. That's why she's wearing a paper bag, and the prince says, "You look dirty, go clean yourself up," and in the end, she says, "I don't need a prince." So it's kind of a backwards fairy tale, and I really like it. But I create, with all my book buddies, this is my Paper Bag Princess words. So this is some of the vocabulary I've picked out of the story that's really important to understand the concepts, as well as it is important for them to know they might not know. Like some of my itty bitties might not know what a castle is. They might not know what a dragon is. They might not know what the world is. So we can match these pictures. They'll each take a turn and I'll say, okay, what is that? If they all know, great, we'll move on. If they don't know, then we can talk about it, give them some prior knowledge. I could pull my castle out of the cabinet, things like that. So that's how I usually do this pre-teaching vocabulary, which is step 1. You can also do a lot of other things. I also, for my older students, like to use the vocabulary cards that are on SLP Now. And I like to give them a bingo data, and it's like a bingo game. They can find them during the story, but we talk about all the pictures on the story before we read. So that's a way you could do it. If you're reading a story about penguins, you could watch a YouTube video about penguins. You could even just do, so you don't need any extra materials, just do a picture walk and say, oh, what's this? A dragon, okay, do we know what that is? What is she wearing? Things like that. So you're previewing the book and teaching them the vocabulary they might need. If you're working with even older students, which again is not my specialty, but I have done it, I've gone through the book ahead of time and used highlighter tape and highlighted some important words that they might not know, some higher level words, and we've talked about those before the story. You can also ask them, what do you know about princesses? What do you know about dragons? What experience, if you're reading a book about a snowman, what experience have you ever built a snowman? How do you build a snowman? Things like that. So again, you don't have to go out and buy new anything. You can, if you want to. I like these because my kids are familiar with the interactive book format. They like to do the matching. I like having a concrete picture for them. You can buy any book buddy that I have. But you can adapt any material just to pre-teach some of that vocabulary, get them excited about the story. If you're really short on time, I before have done this in the hallway, walking to the speech room. I'll bring the book with me, some flashcards, or we'll just talk about, today in speech we're talking about princesses. What do you know about princesses? And get their little minds working. So step 1 to my literacy-based units and sessions is pre-teaching vocabulary. Now step 2 in my literacy-based sessions is reading the book with a caveat. This is where I always got stuck with my itty bitties, and I just lost them because I was trying to have them pay attention to a story and read along and just look at this, and they sometimes weren't paying attention, and if their body looked like it was, they were sitting still and looking at me, they weren't getting it. So I always like to incorporate anything to keep them engaged in the story and focused on what's important. So the way that I do that from my book buddies is with a story map. So I give each of my students one of these story maps that they can color in, and then when we find this thing in the story, they have to color it in. So when we find the prince, I'll say, oh, what did we find? The prince. So this serves 2 functions. It keeps 3 functions, really. It keeps their hands busy because they're coloring. They're not just sitting there. I don't know. All my kids are really squirrely. If you have kids that can just sit and listen to a whole story, you're a rock star, but mine don't. So it keeps their hands busy. It highlights to them this is important because there's a lot going on in these pictures that is not as important when you're just trying to get the gist. So it keeps their hands busy. It highlights what's important, and then we will use this again as their story map to retell the story. So when they're the one that colored it, they take a lot of ownership of it, which I really love. So you don't have to do this. Like I said, if you have a sheet of vocabulary words, I get some from SLP now. You can just have them color them in or bingo dot them as they find them. If you have, I've used a smash mat before. If my kids are kind of bored of coloring, when they find these things, they smash it with Play-Doh. That's fun too. So there are TPT sellers who sell those little interactive pieces that you can have students, they look like little interactive book pieces, but you Velcro them into the book, either match to a picture or answer a question. I know Mrs. D's Corner has them for a lot of books. I know that Made For Me Literacy makes them with their books, and I know Live Love Speech has them as well. I don't create them. I don't use them very often, but they are another option if, you can give your kids each 3 pieces and they have to match them to the book when they find them. So that's step number 2. We read the book with some piece of engagement with it. That's really the key. Something to highlight the important pieces of the text as well as to keep their hands and their brains busy. So that's step number 2. Step number 3, I won't spend very much time on, but it is to assess their comprehension. So I do that a variety of ways depending on their level. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this. So the first level is with these cards. I'm sure anything you buy on Teachers Pay Teachers, anything you find anywhere has some comprehension cards with visual choices. I know pretty much every book companion that I buy on TPT has some version of this. So again, no need to go buy something new, just see what you have. You can create it yourself if you have Boardmaker or Symbol Sticks, or if you're not selling it, just Google images. So this is the first level because it has 2 choices, and it has this visual cue right here to tell them what kind of question it is. So this will tell them this is a where question, and this is something my students practice and see all the time. So this is level 1. Level 2 is this worksheet. It's the exact same questions as these, but it's a little harder because there are 3 choices, and it does not have any visual cues as to what kind of question. So this is just a little bit harder. And then number 3, I use a smash mat. So this is what I will do when I use a smash mat is use this exact same sheet. I will just have it, and I will read off of it who gets taken by the dragon. And instead of having 3 choices, they will have 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. I can't count. Anyway, a lot of choices. So I could say, who gets taken by the dragon? And they would smash the prince. Who or what does the princess wear? And they could find the paper bag. So that's what I use this for. I also use it for things like object functions. So what does a queen live in? What do you use? You use this to get your groceries from the store. This flies, things like that. You could use this for all sorts of things, but one of the main ways I use it is as the hardest level of comprehension until they don't get anything. So you could do a 4th level and just read these questions to them and give them the book, and if they don't know the answer, they can go find it in the text. That's another thing I reinforce for them for comprehension, because I like to think of it as I'm not assessing their memory, unless you are, but I'm not assessing their memory. So if they need to go back in the text and find it, that's a great skill for them to have. We don't, if we need to find an answer in, a book that we read, we look back in the book. It's not a test. I'm assessing their comprehension. So the skill of being able to look back in the book is something I like to teach. If you don't know, look back in the book. Because it's a great compensatory strategy for them that they can carry from kindergarten through high school. Look back in the book. So that is what we do. That is step number 3, is assess comprehension. Step number 4 is retelling the story. I always like to have my students retell the story at whatever level their story retells are at. One is it's a really great way to get a quick language sample. 2 out of 3 times will pull out my phone audio recorder or videotape them retelling a story, and I have a language sample because the attendance can be sporadic or schedules change, and I have an IEP coming up and I need information for their IEP, and it's really easy to pull a language sample and get tons of information. And I think it's fun sometimes. I text the videos of them retelling to their parents. I use Google Voice and I text the videos, and their parents can see where they're at. They think it's really fun. It's a positive interaction with the parent, and the parent knows what we read, and they will bring this home with them and say, oh, tell me that story you read in speech. So I do that a lot too, text videos to parents. You might want to check with the privacy stuff at your school, but it is allowed at my school to text this stuff using Google Voice to parents. So we will retell the story. You could give them their story map and they can retell it. You can give them the book and they can retell. You can make a story map. You can draw it out. Whatever works for you, just have them retell. So that's step number 4. Step number 5 is going to be different for every single kid on your caseload. So this is what I call extending skills. So a lot of my students have goals for following directions, spatial concepts, comparing and contrasting, describing, things like that. So whatever goals you want to directly target, that you want to directly work on, kind of within the context of the story, whatever you need data on, I do it in this point. I think I forgot to tell you, I do steps 1 through 3 on the first day and 4 through 6 on the second day. So we will pre-teach vocab, read the story, and assess comprehension day 1, and then now we're on day number 2. So we will retell the story when we get back on the next day, and then we will extend the skills. So I have a couple options in here for you, or you can use whatever you want. If you have toys that go along with this theme and they have spatial concepts goals, use those. If you have describing cards, whatever. So some options you might have. I always include these spatial concepts books. So Where is the Dragon? And when I did this with my students, we read this, and then I actually have a castle with a prince, a princess, and a dragon that I got on clearance at Walgreens after Christmas. It was an amazing find. It was like $1.50. I'm obsessed with it. It's at school, or I would show you. But we read this book and then quickly followed directions, putting the dragon in, on, next to, whatever. We followed directions with the dragon. So that's an option to work on spatial concepts. You can work on comparing and contrasting with the same and different books that I include. If you need to work on pronouns or grammar, you can use these as you would like. All of these include pieces you can cut out and throw in a sensory bin, so if you want to use these for whatever. At this part, use your clinical judgment. You are a professional, you know your kids, you have a lot of skills. I like for my own brain, I like knowing, we're thinking about princes and princesses, but do whatever you want, because at this point, this is where I work on individual goals with my students. You can use the words books to practice describing. I've done that before. Here it is. So we can go through this again, and then I'll have them use the EET to describe it. You could do that. So sky's the limit. But step number 5 is extending skills, whatever skills your students have. Megan here. I know this is terrible quality, and I'm wearing a hoodie, and my bed is not made. But the very end of this video deleted. So I just want to tell you step number 6 of this literacy-based session framework. And number 6 is creating a parallel story. I'll put a little clip over this that shows some of the resources I use to create parallel stories, but basically that just means that you will let your students take the information and the vocabulary that they learned and put it into their own kind of narrative. So if you're using like the video showed, if you're using a How to Catch a Unicorn book, they can create their own story of how they would catch a unicorn. So that's step number 6. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. It's a good wrap up. You can give them toys or manipulatives, whatever you want. So that's step number 6. I'm sorry that the nicely lit, nicely recorded video is gone, but you'll have to deal with this. So this is the end of the video. If you liked it, if you like this type of video to help you structure your sessions, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It helps us out so much and will help us get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of summer vacation, which for us is September 2nd. So like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below what kind of videos you want to see in the future, and let me know what your favorite book is to use for literacy-based therapy, because I'm always looking for good other books. So